The support or the trust in China really has collapsed, hasn't it, over the last couple of years?
Absolutely. In the last 2 years, we've seen trust in China halve. And that's really very significant. Less than a quarter of Australians now say that they trust China. At the same time, we've also seen confidence in China's president, Xi Jinping, collapse at the same time. So again, 2 years ago, more than half the country said that they trusted him. And now that number sits at 22%.
Yeah, indeed. It's quite a drop in just a couple of years. A symptom of what's been a very difficult time in the bilateral relationship, no doubt, Natasha.
That's absolutely right. I think that 2 years ago, Australians very much saw China as an economic opportunity. In our poll in 2018, you have 8 in 10 Australians saying that China is more of an economic partner. That's very much shifted with conversations about foreign interference, about Huawei. We've seen issues in Hong Kong and Xinjiang and many other elements of friction in the bilateral relationship. And so today we can see many more Australians viewing China as a threat rather than as an economic opportunity.
It's also quite a drop in the United States approval among Australian voters and those you've surveyed because, it's our closest strategic and defence ally, and yet on the question, how much do you trust the following countries to act responsibly in the world, that they've been on a steady decline over the last decade.
It's true, and particularly since 2016. So actually trust in the United States was quite high back in 2011, for example, but now it is really at that bare majority. Only 51% say that they trust the United States. But there are a few different things going on here. Australians are still very much supportive of our alliance with the United States. 8 in 10 Australians say that it's important to our security. And this has tended to be resilient even when Australians have not liked or found unpopular particular American presidents. So even today we can see that that is holding firm. But at the same time, 1 in 3 Australians have confidence in President Trump, and almost all Australians do not approve of his America First policies.
Yeah, indeed. So it's a view towards the United States on the one hand, which is much more positive than the president on the other, who there is very little faith in terms of his leadership if you look at this poll.
That's right. And I think that right now Australians are feeling quite anxious about the world. There's a lot of insecurity, a lot of pessimism about our economy. And so Australians are leaning back towards our traditional partner in some ways. A couple of years ago, when we asked Australians which country was more important to Australia, they were divided. An equal number said China and the United States. We can now see that swung a little bit back towards the United States. So I think the decline in sentiment towards China has also had an effect on Australians turning to the United States, but they're still not necessarily convinced by what they see.
There'd be some bragging rights you can see in that survey there for Jacinda Ardern next time she meets with Scott Morrison.
That's right. Jacinda Ardern continues to be the leader that Australians express so much confidence in. She was at the top of the list last year. She's there again this year. The other one that's notable, though, is Prime Minister Abe of Japan. As I said, Australians are less trusting and less confident in most at the moment. You can see declines for almost every country in the world. But Japan has actually gone up, and confidence in Prime Minister Abe has also gone up. So some sharing of bragging rights, perhaps.
Indeed. And finally, on threats to Australia's interests, some issues that have been there for a long time, like drought, like climate change, a downturn in the global economy. But there's one that stands out, doesn't it, right at the very top, or just under drought and water shortages, and that is COVID-19.
That's right. So COVID-19, of course, has been this unprecedented threat to the country. And what we've seen is that a lot of the things that are usually at the top of that list, climate change being one of them, terrorism being another, they've all been completely overtaken by COVID-19 and the threat of the pandemic. Remembering that this poll was taken in mid-March when everybody was very worried about how Australia was going to go. A month later, we asked Australians how we'd gone, and 9 in 10 Australians were very satisfied with the way the Australian government had handled the coronavirus pandemic.
Natasha Kassam from the Lowy Institute's Public Opinion Program. I appreciate your time today. Thank you very much.